This conference will now be recorded.
We are now live streaming. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you all. Good morning, everyone. The FSMB Recommendations Review Committee will come to order with the following members present, please. Dr. Rothermel?
Present.
Dr. Safran?
Present.
Mr. Jackalone?
Yes, present.
Dr. Feibel?
Here.
And myself, Michael Schottenstein. May I please have a motion to approve the February 10th, 2021 minutes as drafted?
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you so much. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thank you. So the agenda for today is to discuss the recommended statutory language regarding the addition of a consumer member to aid in the supervision of investigations. Staff provided us with draft language to that effect. It requires board approval of consumer member participation. The language appears to provide flexibility regarding the ability to specify consumer member involvement in either specific steps in the process or approval by category, such as for sexual misconduct investigations. The language allows the president to have flexibility regarding the appointment process in determining which of the consumer members is appointed. And finally, the board may rescind the authorization of consumer member participation in investigation supervision if needed. Stephanie, would you like to jump in at this point?
We think the language is both flexible but clear. You have the draft in front of you. Obviously, we're happy to take comments on that, but I do think Dr. Schottenstein hit the highlights. I think our most important piece is that we preserve flexibility on this. This will be a new process for us, and if we want to expand it, if we want to change it, I think you never get the guarantee of a second chance at legislation, right? And so I think we need to be very mindful that when we draft, we propose something to the legislature that gives us that flexibility to adapt as we go forward.
Thank you, Stephanie. Any comments on this language? Mr. Jackalone.
Stephanie, I just want to clarify. I'm reading the language, but I just want to make sure this allows for flexibility in terms of you're not dedicating one consumer member. We can pick and choose, right, when convenient.
Yeah, so I think those were some of the conversations that we accounted for with that piece. So I think we heard some feedback that there was a preference to have some stability in who was picked. And then we heard some from the consumer members who said, well, we would actually like to rotate this a little bit. And so I think the language allows for either option.
Okay, great.
Dr. Feibel.
Yeah, along those lines, do we want to just add any consumer member, just to make it clear? And then that would be one suggestion. The other thing I worry a little bit about is, as I read this, I know what we're trying to do, where we're blanket approval, but I read this and I worry that some people could potentially say that each case you have to vote on. So do we want to put that it go in here that it goes from a case to a blanket for a type of case? Can we put that in there to be clear, or is that not something we should put in here?
You know, Jonathan, Dr. Feibel, I think the broader the language legislatively, the better. Then the processes that we can work through institutionally, structurally, because the more you get directive within the legislation, the more opportunity there is for mischief legally.
Thank you so much, Ms. Montgomery. And, Stephanie, also to Mr. Jackalone's point about rotating the consumer members, the implication of the language is this is a one at a time consumer member situation, right? In other words, as opposed to having two simultaneously appointed, the implication is that even if we rotate members, it would be one member appointed on any given occasion?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's what we contemplated. I mean, I think the language really does leave the flexibility that if you wanted more than one at a time, you could. I don't know why one would ever do that, because then you're just taking voices off of the vote then, right? Then you're putting two in the process and one at the final vote. So I can't imagine a situation when that would happen.
So Dr. Feibel's question might be better reflected by and Dr. Schottenstein by saying, the president shall designate necessary consumer members or or somewhere where it could be one or many if several if you need to. So you're not restricted to only one consumer member, we only want, generally speaking, I agree with you, you only want one, but if you want to keep some flexibility, as Dr. Feibel suggested with his proposed amendment, maybe the addition of a consumer member or members in the supervision, then you have broader, you get to a little bit of what Dr. Feibel was talking about when he was suggesting an amendment.
Well, I'm going to go back, if we can, real quickly to Dr. Feibel's comments. So I think, Dr. Feibel, I think we're covered with the any part of any investigation, because if the board takes a vote, let's say, for example, the board decided to have have the consumer member added to all sexual misconduct cases, right? Then there would be a board vote for any case designated as sexual misconduct, and that would stick until the board rescinded that vote. There could be an odd situation. I mean, I'm just kind of throwing out there possibilities where I came to the president and said, I would like board approval for a consumer member assigned to a specific case. I don't imagine this happening. I really don't, but it does allow us that flexibility to do that, to assign someone to a specific case. And I think, again, if we're going to make the change, we should make the change to account for as many scenarios as possible. You think about some of the language, some of the discussion we've had around F5 with respect to the Strauss situation and how many interpretations we've had of that. And, could we do this? Could we do that? Well, I think this at least allows for that possibility for multiple scenarios.
My comment was more to not box ourselves out, to make sure we didn't have to do it on every on every single one. I didn't want to have to do that.
Right. I think we can take a full board vote on categories.
And so in that respect, Stephanie, to your point earlier, which is, yes, we would not conceive of a situation where we would have two consumer members appointed for sexual misconduct cases. But I guess what I was referring to previously was, would we ever appoint one for sexual misconduct and maybe down the road appoint another for minimal standards? And that way you'd still have, one consumer member who's appointed in any given situation, since presumably those things would not overlap.
You could, under the language, I think.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm hearing you right, we have the flexibility right now with this language that we're looking for, given the comments that we've had thus far today. The thought crossed my mind as well, that had been mentioned earlier too, which is, would we need to specify consumer member or members, as plural? Are you feeling like that is indicated, or you feel like we're covered the way it's written right now?
I think we'll talk about the comments and kind of think through the language. I think we're actually covered, but I think we can look at it a little bit. I will also just remind everybody that we take a first draft and we get things, what we believe to be perfect, because we have wonderful legal counsel. But LSC gets to do the real draft. And so we can try to get it perfect to present, and then we'll see what comes out on the other side. And then we'll continue to give feedback as to why we wanted it to look the way we did, and for very specific reasons. But we will look at that to make sure that we're accounting for those scenarios.
Dr. Bechtel.
Yes, Stephanie, I had a question. When we finalize the final language for this, what are sort of the next steps then as far as getting the statutory changes approved? Can we do that by rule, or do we have to go to the legislature to do this?
So that's a great question. What we were thinking is, if we could get committee consensus, at least on the language substantially, as it's drafted here, we can go back and, tweak a word here or there. But if we could get full board approval on the language today, we could actually include this in our Strauss legislation package. And we are now to the point where we think we have a final package. We've talked with a lot of stakeholders and policymakers, and we think we have a package that's ready to shop in sort of final draft form to stakeholders. So our plans for that Strauss legislation actually over the next few weeks is to take that back to OHA, OSMA, the prosecutors, and really start driving that toward the legislature. So if that's the case, we would love to include this piece in that package.
So would you like a motion then from the committee to approve the language as drafted?
That would be great.
Sure. I mean, I am very happy with the language. I think it really addressed a lot of the issues that we were hoping to. And even having the conversation today that we've had thus far, it sounds like it is appropriate. Anybody else have any thoughts about this matter? Okay. Shall we have a motion then to approve this language as drafted?
So moved.
Dr. Safran and
Okay.
Dr. Rothermel, thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so we'll say that the motion passes, and I'll mention it this afternoon when I give a report to the full board as well, and see if we can get the full board to concur. Any other? Yeah, of course. Any other FSMB committee matters this morning? Okay. Well, grateful certainly for everybody's time and attention this morning, and I'll look forward to seeing you, at the next committee meeting, and hope it's a great day for everyone. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Dr. Safran and Ms. Montgomery, I think I saw. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.
All right, thanks.
Aye.
This conference is no longer being recorded.